Welcome to Healing the Spirit, a space where we awaken our creativity, deepen our connections, and remember who we are through the lens of astrology, archetypes, and art making. I'm your host, Jonathan Coe. Hello everyone, welcome to Healing the Spirit. Over the years, I've been considering different ways that I can bring music more into this podcast. And I've done that throughout some of the episodes by bringing in people who are musicians. And as many of you know, music was a huge part of my life growing up. I studied to be a classical pianist, and music is truly one of my most important love affairs. And I'm really excited to share this conversation with you that I had with my guest, TanyaMarck Oviedo, because we had a really potent and dynamic conversation about music, not just from the perspective of performing music, but more from the perspective of the role that music can play in terms of how we care for ourselves and for others. I love speaking with TanyaMarck about music because one, they're a kindred spirit and someone whose perspectives and energy I deeply adore. And two, because TanyaMarck is someone who is so generous about sharing their personal perspectives and stories in ways that feel nourishing and enriching. And you'll see that come through so beautifully in this conversation, and it inspired me as well to really share some very personal stories about music that I don't even know if I've shared with people I'm super close to in my life. And having a chance to really reflect on that very personal relationship that one can have with music is so beautiful. And it's also making me think about how, as a child, one of my obsessions was this book called The Mozart Effect by Don Campbell, which talks about music as a healing force. And we get to really explore that in this episode. And I hope that you really enjoy that. For those of you who are not familiar with TanyaMarck and their work, TanyaMarck is a two-spirit, non-binary, queer, native, indigenous person of color, a person in recovery, as well as an embodied care practitioner, educator, and mentor. Their work prioritizes accessible care for vulnerable and marginalized communities, and we were first connected through their other project, Queer Spirit, which they host with Nick Venegoni. Queer Spirit hosts these care circles, and they also have a podcast, which I have been very privileged and honored to also have been a guest on. All right, let's get into this episode. TanyaMarck, hello.
Jonathan, hello.
I am so excited to talk
Can
with you
you see
today.
me bouncing?
You are bouncing. I am
Ah.
giddy to talk with you. I'm so excited to have you over. First of all, every time I get to connect with you is just such a blessing. Thank you.
Samesies,
Thank you.
samesies,
hmm
samesies.
So today we're going to talk about music because I know it's a point of
Mm.
connection between us, among many others, which I'm sure will just start weaving itself into our beautiful conversational space here. Um, but yeah, I'm curious, TanyaMarck. I'm remembering now that you were the one who had the spark of an idea for us to start talking about music, and I'm curious to hear more about the origin of that spark. The last time you and I spoke, we actually really shared very deeply personal stories about music, which has been teaching me a lot, actually. It's
Mm.
been teaching me a lot, and it's been helping me understand my own relationship with music has been that I feel very deeply connected, committed, and devoted to music in ways that are not always reflected in the environment around me. So there's a story of alienation there too.
Mm.
But when I was talking to you, I think the medicine or the alchemy that began to happen is this process of recognizing, wow, how special that very personal journey that I've taken with music has been for me, and the opportunity to witness your journey, which probably we'll talk about too today.
One of the things that we've been talking about, just in us building our connection, cultivating
Mhm.
connection, right? I remember coming into each other's space. I think it was there's a virtual, some type of magic-y space, and I attended, and then you were there, and I could just feel there's just something sometimes that happens when you feel with people where I'm like, oh, that person's really magic-y. When I have those nudges, I believe nudges, downloads, all kinds of ways to kind of describe what that is. I feel like it's my team kind of saying like, hey, like here's a really magicy person in the room, and I'm a nudger. So somehow, some way I figured out how to reach out to you and be like, hello. Somehow there's a story there where I kind of figured out a way to, because that's very vulnerable, I think, to also because you don't know, it's not about whether
Yeah,
you're feeling it back. I just
yeah.
think it's very vulnerable when I get these kinds of downloads around people, because it's a very special feeling, and it's something that, like, I don't want to put it onto the other person. It's one of those things where you're just like, a part of me is like, excited, magic person. And
Mm.
then also, here's all this care-centric, trauma mindful stuff. TanyaMarck, stay on the ground. Do not take off and flutter away. TanyaMarck, discernment. You know what I mean? Like all the tools I've learned. And I want to thank my dear friend, Samantha Williams, because that's the
Mm.
kind of stuff we talk about, is we talk
Mm.
about the responsibility of, as a practitioner and being
Mm.
someone who works with energy, the responsibility of how to tend to my care and my vibes and my experiences. So I nudged and you nudged back, and then we kind of started to interact. And
Yeah.
then I think the underlying undercurrent for you and I is we've always felt some kind of way of like, let's connect, let's
Mm.
cultivate connection, let's connect.
Yeah.
And as we've been doing that, there's been these common denominators that kind of show up, right? So as these common denominators show up, I feel like that is just showing to me like, wow, there's something here in this connection, feels aligned, right, to follow and to navigate. And so
Mm.
I've been just really excited to, and when we dipped into the music pool in our last conversation, it was also very healing for me too,
Yeah.
because I think there are parts of who I am as I'm going through discovery of how I'm showing up for the world today that are very much attached to this really deep connection I have with music, and it feels very vulnerable to bring that out on the table to talk about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, so yeah, let's dive right in. Let's dive right in. So, since our last conversation about music, there was this part of me that was feeling like, there are components here that are waiting to emerge to the surface. Like it's not just music, it's the way that music is interacting with other areas of our lives and parts of our stories, parts of our identities. And before we press record, I I got this image of this triangle between music,
Mm.
the immigration and the immigrant experience, as well as queerness, and how all of that plays some role in you and I's connection to music.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that idea of the triangle. And it's kind of like, I get, when you're saying it, I can just hear like, these little pings like, yes, these are these common denominators and these threads that are really interestingly interwoven as we get to know one another, like really interwoven into our stories in really neat ways, I think, too.
Yeah.
So I want to share something because, well, I want to share that I always prep before any shared time that I spend with
Mm,
people. And when I do grounding and kind of drop in and say, hey, what vibe is here? And I just, because it's just going to keep showing up on my radar, I want to share the song, the chorus of the song that's showing up and has
yeah,
been,
yeah.
because now we're here in the car. So it's all at the car wash. It's the car wash song, that disco song, and I'm like, this is just so apropos. Like, and it just in all the triangle ways, right? So
Mm,
I want to connect that dot of
mm,
like disco is just has such an invite to the frequency of queerness, period, right?
yeah.
And in regards to immigration and immigrant, like I was very lucky. My mom is the oldest of nine. So I did get to spend time with my different aunts, right? Who are, and one uncle and, the rest are aunts. And each one of them introduced me to a different genre of music. One of my aunts was very into disco dancing with my uncle, and she would blast disco music, and it's why I fell in love with disco.
Wow.
That was a very interesting song to come in. I feel like we are in full moon energy, so car
Mm.
wash to me feels very like release what no longer serves, clean our vehicle right here, your vehicle,
Ooh,
my
I
vehicle.
love that. Yes.
So yeah, I just wanted to share, like, that's the type of intimate relationship I have with music, is that when I prep for shared time with people, sometimes music will show up as a way to also just, give me an indication of the
Mm,
vibes, the energy, or maybe even little messages.
mm,
So
mm,
yeah.
mhm. Beautiful, beautiful. I really love hearing your relationship with disco and this relationship that connects you and your various family members. Yeah, music does have that effect, doesn't it? It brings people together. Something that I noticed, Tanya Mark, as this through line between all the different things I love to do is the possibilities of transcending a limited or limiting idea of what the self even is. And that's why I love doing magic. That's why I love mysticism. That's why I love meditation. And that's why I love music.
Yes.
Because music, for 5 minutes, I get to be Barbara Streisand,
Yes. Oh my God.
you
Yes. Thank
know?
you for naming that. Yes.
Yeah.
That's
I
right.
was telling you the story of being a child that I want to
Yes, it's the
retell
best.
again.
Please do, because it's so special.
It's so good. When I was a child, and many of us probably had this experience, I remember there was this one weekend when my parents took us to a day trip outside of where we were living. And I sat in a very back row. I had to be woken up very early, and I was kind of mad about it because I didn't like waking up early at all. I still don't. And I had my Walkman and I had these cassettes, and one of the cassettes I have is Celine Dion's compilation. I think it was probably her
Yes.
first best of. And one of the songs there was, it's all coming back to me now. And I was just like in that space, baby, baby. Because I'm like, I don't want to go. So here's bratty Jonathan, 7 years old or whatever, um, vibing to Celine Dion,
Yeah. And the
and
magic of that music and that frequency, her frequency,
yeah.
what you were feeling in your body, it was, you guys were paired up and
Mm,
hanging out. You
mm,
know what I mean? I'm
mm.
imagining you probably had it on loop, right? It was on,
I
or
had
some
it
form of repeat, right?
totally.
Yeah.
1000%. Um, ooh, I think you are touching on a really interesting topic here, Tanya Mark. Music and frequency. Would you say more about that?
Well, it's interesting because, like, when you were talking, that I just when you share your moment, I see you in the back seat, and it's so dramatic and it's so great, and I'm so happy for that iteration of Jonathan. I got, like, we paralleled that to me, like,
Mm,
so me at that age was little league, right? And my coach had taught us to, like, if you like, like I look back on it now, like I coach Eddie M. I will thank him for that. But I will say, like, in my mind, like as a kid, I was hearing this power ballad of song. Like, if you love baseball, find a song that you love and see yourself playing baseball. So really it was this introduction. Music was already on my platform, right? I had been introduced through various family members in all kinds of ways. I was super lucky, right? Because at a young age, I was introduced to all kinds of music and I just loved music, right?
Mm.
So
Mhm.
then he said, find this. So what I did was it was Queen, We Will Rock You, and We Are the Champions. And I had
Mm.
it on this, like, I had my Sony Walkman and I was laying down and I would see myself, I would get in my uniform, talk about ritual and talk about being a witch. I would get into my uniform, I'd put my headphones on and over and I'd get my build up like, oh, we are the champions. Like I'd see myself playing, hitting all these things. And like, I could feel the potency of music,
Nice.
the frequency of music in my body.
Yeah.
Like what that coach said, like, thank you again, Coach Eddie. Like, but also I think taught me how, like, that what I was experiencing, right, was real, that I could feel a connection to what I was feeling in my
Mm.
body and what was coming from the medicine of the sound, the frequency of that, and how it was like building me up and making me just feel confident and badass and
Yeah.
excited to
Yeah.
play. Like I loved playing Little League Baseball. So it just made me feel excited and good. So I, making mixtapes and all that stuff and all that just kind of, whoo, there's a whole
Hmm.
thread of experiences around that.
Mixtapes are
Ah,
magical,
my
magical.
God.
And I was alive. I was alive during the
Yeah.
time when one literally had to use that, the two machine thing, the two
Oh,
slots,
yes.
and
Oh,
you put
yes.
your cassette in
One
one,
cassette in. That's
one
right.
cassette in and the other one, and you record to the I was around.
That's right.
That was still the technology we had to use in response to music and frequency. Um, I've often said that my first energy medicine teacher was music, because music, in some ways, is the act of perceiving the frequency of that which doesn't have a physical form yet, and then using your physical form to translate that or
Yes.
to allow it to move through your vessel. Um, so that's the first thing I wanted to say. The other thing I wanted to say too was the other day I had a friend who was also a musician and mentioned their fear around music being used or frequency or sound being used in a manipulative way by unsavory, darker
Mm.
forces that are in, of course, we know it's present in the world,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I'm
Yes.
curious to hear your thoughts about this because I was listening to them speak and I had an experience and I've been formulating my thoughts ever since, but I'm curious if anything's kind of coming up for you around that.
Well, when you say that, I mean, yes, I appreciate that person raising that and I appreciate
Mm.
you naming it because I
Mm.
think it's like any other type of tool or object in the world. Everything comes with both its light and dark
Mm.
energies. And
Yeah.
I think intention really matters. And that comes to the person that's the responsible user.
Mm.
Like those are the things that I think about in very care-centric ways. Intention, where you are with where the music is and being discernment right around
Mm.
that stuff because it is a very potent frequency and it can, I am sure, have impact, right? So my feeling about it is that yes, it does exist in that way just like anything else does, and that it's about being mindful around,
Yeah.
just being mindful in whatever way that means, and
Mm.
that it can be very potent. I mean, it makes me think of so many things, like, the way that when we go out in public and we're in spaces and the music that they choose to play. I
Yes.
just want to think of a recent example that happened in December. I was dining with two family members and I'm
Mm.
laughing because the music was so loud. We were
Mm.
laughing like I looked around the restaurant and everyone else was also kind of leaning in, and so I had asked the server, could you turn it down? And I
What did they
realized
say?
that they didn't want to turn it down because it's a way of, it was a popular day. So they were trying to make sure people were eating and leaving, right? So in that
Wow.
way, that
Wow.
sound frequency, right? Because I recognized everyone in the restaurant and we were giggling because we're like, whoa, this is like really loud. Like, sometimes when things are just so obnoxious that you're just like, oh my God. So you just are just like, well, this is the space we're in for the next, 30 minutes. So,
Yes.
here we are.
Yeah.
But also I think it speaks to that point. Like I think that it is sound, right?
Mm.
Music it does carry a lot of frequency, and it's kind of like music meets can, and depending on where people are at, it's quite a interesting
Yeah.
combo. I'd love to hear
Wow.
what came up for you around it.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate your perspective. And it's interesting to hear about that experience, Tanya Mark, because yes, it definitely has an impact on our bodies. My immediate response when my friend was saying that was yes, and also our voices are these instruments that can continually, with awareness and consciousness and a little bit of practice, can bring us back into our own frequency.
Hmm.
I had an experience a couple of weeks ago where I had this somewhat challenging conversation with a friend. I left feeling really weird, and I was also in a slightly weird place within myself. Physically, I wasn't feeling amazing. Um, and then I I decided to go to the gym, but this isn't something I usually do. I ended up listening to my own podcast, one of my own solo episodes, and
Mm-hmm.
my own voice and my own cadence, the way that I was creating, stringing together sentences and weaving frequency felt like a homecoming to me.
Oh,
Within
yeah.
20 minutes of movement and hearing the sound of my own voice, I felt like I just came home.
Wow.
And my nervous system was in such a different place than prior to this experience. So I understand the concern, right, around music or sound or frequency being used in unsavory ways. And also I find it encouraging, hopeful, exciting that we also have the medicine to that, which is our own voice and the sounds that our bodies are making.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I appreciate you naming that in that way, and that how it just was very warm to hear you say that
Mm,
hearing your frequency and your flow was a way
yeah.
to, you experienced disruption. Your care response was to go find some movement and to
Mm,
jump into a frequency that was going to bring you back home. And
yeah.
that frequency in that moment was being in the combination of movement and hearing your frequency,
Mm,
right? I think it also speaks to how sound pairs really well with other care tools,
yes.
right? And how it doesn't have to be, specific to music, our voices,
Mm,
and the potency of the frequency of that. I really
mm,
appreciate that. And where it took me was, it makes me think about, as the person who lives on their own, or Pluto and I live together, that Pluto is my very magical, very super magical beagle who's taking a nap right now.
mm,
I'm really comfortable with sound like coming out of me. So like
mm,
the exhale, not even on it, like it's just sound, whatever that is. I'm in voice practice 3 times a week right now, and
mm,
Miss Mix Puja really invites us to be in sound all the time.
mm.
Like just it's okay, like say things out loud, pray out loud, sing
Yeah.
out loud, even if it's just sound.
Yeah.
And I also want to acknowledge silence as a form of sound and medicine.
Yes.
Because I know, like, so the combination of those things and how it's very return back home to me as well, very come back to center, come back
Yes.
home kind of
Yes.
medicine. So
Yes.
even you in the back of that vehicle, I see you, with Celine Dion. It was like, it was still, while you were feeling like, ooh, I don't want to be going on this trip, you were
Mm.
still in your body, moving, in your
Yeah.
system,
Yes.
feeling the feels.
Yes.
And
Yes.
listening at the gym, take it to the, like, bring it fast forward. Here's another moment. You had a moment of disruption. And
Yes.
so you were going to the gym and you were finding a frequency that was going to bring you back home.
Mm.
Woo!
Mm.
That's so rad.
Thank you for pointing that out and kind of weaving and stitching these different um, fragments together. I would love to hear, Tanya Mark, if you want to share, how do you use sound and music in your care toolbox? Like, what does that look like?
Well, yeah, that's really, thank you for asking about that.
Mm,
It's one of those ones that like it just comes. Like I feel like I'm
mm,
so connected to it that
yeah.
I wouldn't even be able to say like on a daily it might look like this.
Ah,
So this morning when I was prepping for you, it was car wash. I
mhm.
don't know what it will be later today. You know what I mean? But I do
Mhm.
know that that valve, like I picture, thank you, Sam, again for this. I have this mixing board of, that has all of these like energy tools and actions and responses, and that my mixing board of care, like
I
I
love that
go
you
to it
call it
every
mixing board. That's so great.
I go to it on the daily, right? The prayers,
Mm,
the meditation, what needs to be
yeah,
tuned up, what needs to be attuned to.
yeah.
Music tends to show up in all kinds of ways, in
Mm,
just because of the strength of the energy of the day, or
yeah,
sound. I should say sound, because this
yeah.
could also include moments of silence and just and also going out to the backyard and listening to all the nature and to all just
Mm,
what's happening, like, you know what I
mhm.
mean. Those are also, I want to name, like, sound, and there's all kinds of ways we make it, the sounds that are happening around us. I'll go in and ask my system and leave myself open to whatever may come through. And I used to get think like if music wasn't a part of my day, like, oh, something must be wrong. But
Mm,
like I've now understood that, well, silence is also a form of sound, and
yeah.
that can also be considered a form of music to me.
Mm,
So
mhm.
I just, have learned over the years to broaden my definition of what that might mean.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's a cool ask. Yeah.
I want to reflect to you what I'm hearing, which is what I'm hearing is this deep level of awareness and consciousness around that. It's making me reflect on how music and songs are always like multiple times a day coming to me. Like the energy of it is either hanging in my field or it like knocks on my field and it's like, hello, I want to be given voice to, And I love that you are so connected to that from this energetic place
Mm.
and recognizing that that's also a spiritual experience, you
Oh,
know?
yeah. Thank you. I feel like I can also, reflecting it back to you, I can see how it is also interwoven into your care practices and tools,
Mm.
and how you've navigated for a long time. Like it
Yeah.
started, I'm sure there are many more beautiful moments. For some reason, I saw you like when you might be walking about or sauntering around and just singing, like that also is a form of care, right? And
Yeah.
connection to medicine, right?
Yeah.
Because the system is calling, it's like the system is calling for you to be in that vibration of the
Yes.
words must come out in,
Mhm.
and also, god damn it, I want to name it, it's queerness. Isn't that the beauty of
Yes.
queerness? We want to sing
Yes.
all the time. Yes, yes,
Yes.
I am not queer. Like, like
A
let's put a beat to
thousand,
it.
1,000%, 1,000%, Tanya Mark. I mean, I have to tell you, I had this experience a few days ago, um, where my partner and I went on the subway, and there was this guy sitting across from us. He was he was young. He was probably the same age as us, right? He was probably in his 30s or so. And he was humming the whole time. And
Oh,
he was happy, Tanya Mark. This is in the subway. He was happy.
yes.
At first, we were like, is this guy okay? But
Yeah.
after a while, he was totally fine. He was texting his friends. He was just in, there was something moving through him, and he
Mm.
was letting it move through him. And you know what I did not see, Tanya Mark? I did not see toxic masculinity. It was not
That's right.
present in his being.
Well, and Meg, can we also name, like, I love that that's what you and your partner, or what you observed, right? And this person doing that and something moving through.
Yeah.
In it from an indigenous lens, humming is very grounding. So
Yeah.
kudos to that person for being on a
Yes.
subway, which has a shit ton of energy, like
Yes.
floating all around, that this
Yes.
person was like, I'm gonna ground and shield with my humming. You know what I mean? I think that person is super showing their superpower and modeling
Mm,
something for people that,
yeah.
like, that person putting out great vibe. Like you said, there was
Yeah.
no toxic vibes coming out and
No.
oozing. It was
No.
just someone being present
No.
on the subway,
Yeah.
on their ride,
Yeah.
doing what they do. So
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
That's a woo, it's everywhere. Sound in that
Exactly.
way, right? And the way in which it and its impact that it can have. Woo,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Woo.
Yeah. And to add to that, this person um saw this mother and daughter, family who's obviously visiting. They weren't speaking English. Um, and they didn't seem to be from New York. You can just see there's a certain way that New Yorkers walk, right? And this guy stood up and gave up his seat and he
Ah,
moved.
shit.
It was this
Beautiful.
awareness, he was within himself and he was also aware of his surrounding, which is interdependence.
Right. Yep.
Ooh, I get full body chills talking about
Well,
this.
it's amazing because, like, then, okay, we can circle back to what your friend had asked about, like, when sound might be used in unsavory. I like how you said could be used in unsavory way. I was
Mm,
also thinking about how we don't know this person's story, so we're
mm,
giving them, like, it's amazing, like, whatever their vibe and stuff, and also that sound in that way can be used as a tool of care, right?
yeah.
Like the humming or being in a situation, like, maybe you kind of pick up on a vibe that feels unsavory. There's this idea for folks to, like, put a favorite song on, or maybe the
Yeah.
lyrics of a song come up that, like,
Mm,
I invite people, because, like, when you and I talk about it, it's just like it comes in all the time and we're like, hello, and like,
yeah.
yay, because it's been part of our spiritual practice and care practice for so long. And it's
It
making me
has.
think of folks that perhaps maybe are earlier on in their journey with sound and
Mm,
music, that, like,
mhm.
the invite is to, like, bring it in and play with
Yeah.
it. There's no it That's the joy of it to me, is that,
Mm,
like, I mean, how rad is it that, like, I'm prepping for us and, like, this disco song comes on. It just brings me so much joy. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
and I guess the invite here for those that might be exploring it is to have fun with exploring what that connection is and how it might
Mm,
be showing up in ways, how music and sound might be knocking on your
yeah.
care door. I feel like music is such a needed, can be, music and sound can be such needed medicine for so many
Absolutely.
reasons. So yeah,
Absolutely.
to those that are, like, newly navigating connection, or maybe reconnecting, or, like, control alt delete, you're resetting a connection with music.
Yeah.
Like, the idea is to, like, where can you open those, those doors and go, oh, let me take a look at this.
Right. 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 Oh, that really caught my attention, Tanya Mark. What you said about resetting is profound. I'm curious if you have had experiences of resetting your relationship to music. I certainly have plenty of my own stories
Oh
around
my
that, but I'm
gosh.
curious to hear
Yeah.
about yours. Yeah.
Well, I think the one that comes to mind that's the most recent is that actually music for me was very private part of my
Mm.
spiritual practice. And now here I am sharing voice, singing with Nick, chanting, playing
Yeah.
instrument. And I feel like it's been this whole, and I'm very honored and I feel very blessed because it's been a part of me. I think
Mm.
all along it's been a
Hmm.
part of me. And
You are
it,
so musical, my
and
friend.
so,
You really
and so
are.
now, thank you. And now I feel like I'm getting to explore who
Mm.
that part of me, and I'm
Yeah.
getting to do it in ways that, it's felt really curious and
Yeah.
fun, and it's also felt incredibly emotional. And it has
Yes.
involved a lot of, like, shedding and old wounds coming
Mm.
up around
Mm.
self-worth, around, speaking of queerness, like, my truth is I didn't choose to do musical things in school,
Mm.
because I grew up in a time where there was a lot of homophobia,
Mm.
where a lot of people were made fun of. I mean,
Mm.
listen, the irony of it is I went to go be a big old lesbian athlete. So I
Mm.
embraced my queerness, but, like, either way, let's just be real, like, as a queer person, because the timeline that I was in, that was my own internal, I'll own it. It was my own
Mm.
internal homophobia, right? That
Mm.
where I was like afraid that like I already knew that I
Mhm.
was going through a lot, being bullied as tomboy, called dyke, fag, queer, whatever you name it,
Mm.
that I felt like if I were to have chosen music, right, to
Mm.
go to choir or any of those things, was I just going to continue to be bullied?
Yeah.
And I also
Yeah.
want to name, as a non-binary person, I felt very, this is my truth. I would not have wanted to wear a choir dress. And I did not
Mm.
feel comfortable in like the, I mean, I wore my Catholic school uniform because it was uniform and that's it. You know,
Yeah.
I was fine with it and I rocked it
Yeah.
out in a
Yeah.
way that felt good for me.
Mm.
But I also felt like there were aspects, and I didn't know, I didn't have the, I knew I was non-binary. I wasn't living as an out non-binary person,
Mm.
right? So there was a lot attached to my choices, right?
Yeah.
And music was very private to me because I think it was what kept me safe. It was kind of like that
Mm.
moment where you said you went to the gym.
Mhm.
There was a lot going on behind the scenes in my family with substance use disorder and mental
Yeah.
health. And
Yeah.
um, so music was this like safe haven to go to. And I feel like, yeah, it was just more private. And I
Mm.
think it wasn't until even halfway through my teaching that I started sharing music with my students. And we started to vibe and have a whole, there was a whole other experience there. So
Yeah.
being with my music in a different way is very different today than it has been.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
tender. And you
Yeah.
shared too the same thing, that you're also experiencing a form of reset, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
mind expanding on a
I
little bit
would
on that? I would
I
love
would
it.
love to. Yeah, I would love to. But first of all, I just want to really
Hmm.
witness and acknowledge that the tenderness in
Hmm.
your path and your relationship with music. And what I'm hearing from what you shared is the potency of music as medicine that can be so private, right? This is that was my Celine Dion story too.
Yeah. Oh,
There was
yes.
that story of privacy too because I was in the back and I was listening to music that was different than what was being played on the car stereo, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I
That was
mean, like
important.
it is, and thank you. And I appreciate the fact that, yeah, again, it speaks to, right,
Mm.
there's a spectrum. It's not a
There's a
one size fits
spectrum.
all, right,
Mm.
when it comes to it. And I also want to acknowledge, because the same thing, if you are someone who's currently feels that it's keeping music private is what works best for your care toolkit, then right the fuck
That's
on.
great. That's great too. Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
think we all have cycles within that
Hmm.
too. And as you're speaking, as we're speaking about this, I'm reminded how I'm currently coming out of this very private cycle that I've been in the past 4 years or so with music. A lot of my orientation towards music, not necessarily as a listener, but as someone who plays music and someone who shows up publicly as a musician, has been very much oriented towards getting um a certain kind of praise out of it. Like I am with
Hmm.
music. Music becomes this kind of protective. It's very interesting hearing your experience with being an athlete actually in your youth, TanyaMarck, because that was me with music. Yes, people would, I think, in the on the surface, they can label me or bully me, but I did notice that when I kind of really stepped up into the limelight and showed that I had skills with music, the bullying actually stopped. And I'm not saying that that has to be everybody else's experiences,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
But my experience was that it stopped because then people saw me and
Ooh.
and there was something in the seeing that neutralized the field, I think.
Well,
That
it's
was
your
at
sound
least
frequency. It was you
it's my
connecting to
sound
music.
frequency. Yeah.
It's the what you like, you are in something that is like so authentic to you is your magic.
Yes.
And then you
Yes.
performed, and
Yeah.
then like to the bullies, you're like, this is my shiny magic. And then like they're just oh, like
Yeah.
respect. Like,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
takes there's so much vulnerability in performing. Oh,
Right.
there's so much, especially as young people,
Right.
like, with music and stuff. Yeah, they just got a dose of your badassery, and then they're just like, all
They're
right,
like
we'll just
respect.
moving
Yeah.
on. And
Yeah.
and listen, like as magic-y people, like I don't know about you, but I didn't have mentors back then that I could
Mm,
talk to you about what I
mm,
was experiencing. Like,
yeah.
had you had a mentor in that kind of speaking, they'd be like, yes, like a magic mentor, like, that's right, that's your
Yes.
magic. And like, and so I think that that's also very beautiful. Thank you for
Mm,
naming that. Right. Because
mhm.
in a lot of ways, that was you and your spiritual connection and your guides and your
Yeah.
tools going. We got you, Jonathan, you
Yes.
know?
Yes. And I think the most recent development is a recent shift in the past year, maybe year and a half or so, has been really connecting with music as medicine for myself.
Mm,
Very similar to what you were saying earlier, Tanya Mark, about just humming, right, around the
mm-hmm,
house, becoming more aware of like how even just that act, like I don't have to go on stage to heal myself through music. I don't
mm-hmm,
have to have a performance in the calendar. I don't have to perform to a certain standard because for a long time that was important to me. Like it was important for
mm-hmm,
me to be able to go up on stage and to reach a certain level of, for lack of a better term, mastery, right?
mm-hmm,
With the music, with my presence, and really become the leader of the frequency space in that room, in that moment.
mm.
Like that was really important. And I think where I've needed to press reset was I needed to stop performing so that I could really have a relationship with music that's playful and really super at ease. Like nowadays, when I'm quote unquote practicing music, if you actually watch me practicing music, you'll be like, is that even practicing, Jonathan? Because I was just like having so much fun. I'm like on the floor, I'm like rolling around, you know?
Yes.
And I'm really letting that be like this very intimate process between me and my body, um, and my inherent queerness, you know, and to go back to queerness and bullying too. This is not universal, but this was my experience, which was I believe that a strong reason why people were bullying me was because they couldn't understand who I was. There was
Yeah.
something about, and I'm talking now just not queerness strictly as sexuality, but queerness as a way of being, right?
Yep.
There was something kind of alien about my way of being, especially, I would say more so in the US. I feel like I'm less alien than where I grew up. Seriously, which is imagine, you know, but I
Sure.
did feel
Yeah. Thank
very,
you for naming that. Yeah.
yeah, I felt very foreign in some ways, and I don't
Mm,
think people knew how to relate with me, and it brought up some type of crunchiness for them because
mm-hmm.
they're like, who is this person? What's going on? You know, and let's just be fair, some of my bullies were queer too.
I mean, let's tell it. That's the
That's
truth.
that's
Samesies here.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
That's
I'm.
just fair,
It's
just
look.
objective
And
fact.
yeah, I mean, and it. Listen, and I don't think I want to clarify that for anyone listening that that's not a shame. There's no shame in that. That a
Yeah,
lot that it is part of queerness.
yeah.
Like, and I don't want to take away from anyone's queer journey or anyone's queer story, but I can
Mm,
tell you that I was a queer person who also bullied.
mm,
Like,
yeah,
like my
yeah.
situation was very unique. I was raised to assimilate and I was very detached from being an indigenous person of color,
Mm,
and certainly didn't have a playground to explore queerness. And
mm,
I kind of I definitely relate to what you said. I do feel that maybe now when I look back on it, I do think that people had crunchy experience with them because with a person like me, because this is the truth and I mean this very humbly. I think that as I was growing up, some people were like, wow, this person's really cool and I want to hang out with them. And then some people were like, I want to fuck them. I want to hang out with them. I have a crush on them. I'm so confused. Like, wait a minute. I identify as the same as them. Like, I just, like, and because it was just, I was just being Tanya Mark, you know what I
yeah,
mean? And I
yeah.
never, to me, gender, all of that stuff to me was irrelevant. If the
Mm,
vibe was that I wanted to hang and it was a cool vibe, or like I had whatever crush or whatever, like I wanted to be around it. You know what I mean? So it never, and I know that the crunchiness I felt from people, I feel like where you say performing, it was me being an athlete. I was a
mhm.
really, really good athlete. And so
Yes.
that was my shield of like,
Yes. Yeah.
You can say whatever you want, but I'm going to walk my talk and I'm really good at what I do. Like,
Yes.
not you can say whatever you want, I'm giving you permission, but also it was the best that I could do given, I didn't
Mm.
have any idea, other tools, music. So that's another reason why music was so private, because in my queerness and my coming out story, it was a way for me to process bullying and heartbreak, right? So
Yes.
it was private, and private in that, I had many moments of, just listening to songs that would evoke sadness or feelings of
Mm.
release,
Same.
that came from situations. I had so many crushes on so many friends. And when I look back on that, there's no shame in that at all. It's just that
Yeah.
we came from systems that just tried to drive only one type of model. So
Yes.
for folks like us that were just like, we're just queer, weird people, and we just, who cares? Like, we're just people. And we just, it, to me, I can look back on that and go, I can understand how those boxes and expectations created these environments where it was crunchy for all of us.
It was
So
crunchy for all of us.
that's right.
Yes. Mm. I'm letting that soak into my bones.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is crunchy. I mean, I think being human is crunchy.
Mm.
Being
Mm-hmm.
human is crunchy, and we all feel a lot of things, and we're all getting information all the time from various different faculties, right, that we are born with. And I think, um, yeah, naming the hardship of being human. Yeah. Hmm.
Mm. Oh, such rich conversation and rich medicine. Mm.
I feel like we can talk for another 5 hours, Tanya Mark. But maybe this
Yes,
feels like a nice place to land.
I think so too. It
How do you
does.
feel?
It does. I
Yeah,
do. Yeah, this
yeah.
feels like a good landing place as well.
Wonderful.
So
Yeah.
sprinkling in gratitude.
Sprinkling in gratitude and just, yeah, really acknowledging
Mhm.
and bowing to the medicine of music, which
Yes,
has been really
gracias,
present
music. Yes.
in
Thank
our
you.
conversation. Thank you.